Welcome to the Spiritual Roundtable, where we're about to break down, discuss, unpack, and challenge pretty much anything spiritual. Together, we're going to embark on a journey of unlocking spiritual potential through a ton of things like healing, balance, oneness, devil's advocate, and so much more. We always promise to give you what you need and only sometimes what you want. I'm your host, Erika M, child of balance, and here with me, my co-host is Miss Erin M, Keys of Wisdom 369. And today, we're going to talk about spiritual psychosis. Let's not waste a minute. Let's get right into it.
So let's get started with breaking down the ego. Because in our spiritual journey, so many people talk about, eradicating the ego. And really, our ego is such a vital, important piece of who we are. And it helps us to understand our world, our reality. It's a form of our identity. It's where our self-esteem is rooted. So it's not about eradicating that ego, it's about balancing that ego. And when we talk about, why it's such that vital component of who we are, it's again how we see the outside world. It is our awareness, our self-awareness. It is how we make decisions about what actions to take in our life. It's a part of how we resolve and reconcile, conflicting ideas. And the whole point is so that we have a healthy sense of self. So that's the part of a balanced ego that we're trying to achieve on this spiritual journey.
Well, that's the thing. And you said, you just went right into it about how a lot of people have that misconception that we need to slay the ego or the ego needs to be ridded from you. But you got to remember, we're spirit in a vessel. The ego is our humanness that ties us to the vessel. Your ego is your personality, it's your ideologies, it's your life lessons, your experiences, how the human body, your vessel, has coped with life, what things it has established, some safeguards, something. This is all involves your ego. So when people say that they need to eliminate the ego or slay it or kill it, it's really impossible. And a lot of people don't really talk about it, but it's impossible to do it. You're basically telling yourself to slay your humanness. That is the most human tie that we have when we are boots on the ground here. And in order for someone to tell you to get rid of it, they're telling you to only be spirit. But if we were meant to only be spirit, we wouldn't be in a vessel, would we?
No.
We would have stayed up there, down there, over there, where we were originally.
Like you hit the nail on the head, though, because that's the thing. I know, in our personal space and some of our private spaces that we have, when we talk about the shadow, which is a part of your ego, it's all about adopting these things back in to reach that whole state, to no longer be rejecting pieces and parts of yourself. So again, that misconception, like you said, that we're here to slay the ego, that is a very important part of this human experience. But like our topic is today, we're here to kind of, what happens when that imbalance takes place. Because when that imbalance kind of, you know, starts making its way in a more, I want to call it like a pattern of behavior. It's not just a one or two incidences. It's when that, the scales really start to shift one way or the other. It really becomes the source of suffering here in this physical plane. And when we're talking about that, it's like that's kind of where that self-centeredness, that spiritual psychosis, that spiritual narcissism, all those darker aspects of spirituality that not enough people talk about, really comes into play. So I know for me, I like to, we always like to give tangible examples to people. When your ego is out of balance, like what does that actually look like? It seeks to serve itself. It is looking for like that outward recognition. And it sees life as a competition. Like I always say, comparison is the thief of joy. But it's being inauthentic is your thief of joy, because you feel like you're competing with everything and everyone in the world. And that ego tells you that like it's important what other people think about you, or how you're judged or viewed by the world. That's why it's that competition, it's that self-preservation. In the unbalanced ego feels lack. which, again, ties into this, our whole spiritual journey. When you sit in a state of lack, you're literally standing in your own way. You are your own obstacle because you're putting an energy, a frequency, a vibration out in the world where you think you're not good enough. You're waiting on something. Things haven't happened on your timetable.
Well, and that's the thing. And when we start talking about the shadow part of ego, like your shadow is part of your ego. And not a lot of people teach it this way, but you are required to have both parts of your shadow and what would be considered your light in unison when we talk about a balanced ego. So you hear me specifically say it all the time, it's not, which wolf do you feed? It's how much do you feed each wolf? And that's because you need both parts. You need all parts of yourself. The shadow part is you. So if you want your ego to be balanced, that means you give space for all things in equal proportions. And a large part of when people start, I almost want to say deteriorating, or they have so much distress or dis-ease within the body, is because multiple parts of themselves have been denied, or multiple pieces haven't been heard or expressed or given space to exist at all within the physical reality, which is tied with your ego. Now, well, and then that's the thing. And then when we start talking about like all the things that you just discussed of what comprise the ego, it's necessary. It's completely necessary to survive the human world. But like you said, when left unchecked, that's when we get the energetic dis-ease that starts flowing through the body. And because the ego resides in the mind, it looks like mental distress. It looks like a severe state of fight or flight. It looks like a severe state of the inability to cope, which can lead to a ton of different things if left unchecked, unmoderated, uncorrected, right? You can lead to mental breakdowns. I mean, you're talking about self-harming behavior, even in the most severe cases, even schizophrenia, like where you become so paranoid about things that it can escalate into just being a mental imbalance all the way around.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, one of the first things, when we talk about that diseasement or that imbalance, or, kind of when you're starting to I want to call it like, I'm going to just say going into that almost psychosis path, journey, space, you start to disconnect from reality. And that is like the first thing that happens. And you kind of start losing touch with what's actually happening around you. And like you just said it, there begins to be this paranoia that starts to kind of fester. And it's usually starts out for a lot of people is like an irrational distrust or fear of other people, whether that's like from the essence of like everybody's attacking me, the entire world's against me. It's kind of that you're fueling a fear-based construct, which is literally the opposite of what the spiritual journey is about, because the spiritual journey is all about releasing that fear, balancing that root chakra, trusting in self, trusting in spirit, or whatever your understanding is in that space. But when you start to develop that paranoia, that can take shape in the form of almost like a social withdrawal. Like you don't want to leave your house. And I'm not talking like where, you're energetically sensitive. I'm talking like when people are like, I just can't go to the store because there's too many people, or I can't go by myself. There is something there where you are fearful to go into these environments for some reason. And the thing is, when I say you have to look at it with that seat of the observer mentality, if you could once do these things and now there are things you can no longer do, that is like, that again is another sign, if you want to call it that, or a red flag. It's becoming an inability to function. You're not functioning in the same capacity that you once were because there's a paranoia, there's an irrational fear. You think people are plotting against you, this, that, and whatever. You start struggling with that like disorganized thinking. And when I say it, it's like there's this lack to express in a logical way. That's like the best way I know how to say it. It's like the people listening to you kind of are like, the math ain't mathin'. This doesn't really make sense. And then the thing is, the people who still love and care about somebody like this is like a big deal. You know, you're seeing these deteriorations and these things that are like red flags for you, and you almost don't even know what to do. And the thing is, the first thing is to literally not attack them for what they're feeling. It is literally to make them feel heard, but then also help try to, remove or lead them out of the delusion, which often requires help and help in numbers, because when it's just one versus one, they're not always receptive to hearing that, because again, what did we say? There's that extreme paranoia, that is that lack of trust, that is, well, this person's here, they're attacking me, they have ill intentions, when really they're worried about you, they're trying to help you.
Well, that, and then like I feel like some people kind of always ask the question, at least I know we get it a lot, like, but what does that actually look like? Like, what does spiritual psychosis actually look like? And to be completely honest, it could be something super, super small. And we see it all the time in the spiritual community. And it kind of almost bridges into almost like a spiritual trap, if you will, because it kind of fits with the belief of not only believing in delusions and having almost sometimes real world hallucinations, but there's also a superiority complex of either a God complex, a savior complex, some sort of it all hangs on the balance and I'm here to save the world complex, is a form of spiritual psychosis. And it can look something as simple as, disconnecting from reality, like you said, like, I'm the fourth star of the seventh galaxy sitting in this belt, and I'm meant to be here to release the pain and suffering in the world, and I'm the only one who can do this.
Correct.
That's like a layered psychosis. That's like egotism. That's like savior complex. That's layered, but we see it all the time, right? I'm not me. I'm, Mary Magdalene. I'm not me. I'm Isis. I'm not me. I'm, Jesus Christ reincarnated, right? Like, it just goes so far into like reality.
That almost bridges from psychosis to almost a spiritual narcissism, right? Where you're sitting where you think you're at the center of the cosmic events. And like I said, it is the savior complex. It is the grandiose idea that you're here to, like I said, save everybody. And if it's not you, then it's nobody else. And there's a lot of like, that almost falls under spiritual bypassing, because it's a way to actually, back to the ego, because let's bring it back to the unbalanced ego. That's a way to actually hide from insecurities by adopting a construct, a belief, a this or a that. Because the thing is with like spiritual psychosis, and I think I gave you this example when we were talking one time in our own personal space, we have all had that thing, right? The topic, the construct, the whatever, that kind of like kickstarted our awakening, our ahas, our epiphanies, right? And if we can all be so honest with ourselves, when we had that first aha, we went down a rabbit hole, right? And that rabbit hole became like almost all encompassing for a while. And if it wasn't that rabbit hole, it was another rabbit hole. And for some of us, again, we got to be honest here, right? We got that tunnel vision. We got that, this is the narrative. This is the construct. Okay, how did I say it the other day? If you have to pick a side, it divides, it separates, it's that kind of a construct, that's not the construct you want to be in. Because this isn't divide and conquer. This isn't separate. This isn't red pill, blue pill, two sides of the same coin. But that's the thing. We've all been there. So, spiritual psychosis is a real thing. And that's the thing. Sometimes it is a part of everybody's spiritual awakening kind of at one point or another. Some more severe than others. Everything is a spectrum, right? But that's why I said, if we can all be honest with ourselves, we had something that kicked off our awakening. And as a result, we got tunnel vision. It became all consuming. I know for a large portion of the population, a lot of that happened during lockdowns, COVID, this, that, right? Like people really started to do their own research and do this and that. But it became so overwhelming because that cognitive dissonance was there. It started challenging every single thing you believed. And it's like, that's where the discernment comes in. That's why it's so important on this journey to get your ego in balance and in check before you kind of go too far one way or the other. Because, like we said, not only is there psychosis, but then it borders, bridges, overlaps, intertwines, spiritual
Yep.
narcissism, which is such a dangerous place to sit, especially in the spiritual community. Because when people are starting out on their path, what are they looking for? They are looking to connect. They are looking for guidance. So sometimes that means, catching somebody on social media. That means enlisting in private spaces. We don't actually get to always know the people that we're seeking out help from. So that's why I said that's like the whole purpose of what our conversation today, right? Is like, what do you need to look for? What is spiritual narcissism when you're trying to seek this out? Because often so many of us, and I know you and I have both been there, like we've missed the red flags. We've missed
Yep.
them. And not really like our intuition, like something doesn't feel right here. But when you don't have anything else to compare it to, and you don't have a buddy and this and that, you find yourself in a space where you're like, am I the one who's wrong? I'm new here. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to discern. And like this person's supposed to guide me. And then you find yourself in this almost like triangulation where you're being pitted against a community you joined and the people that are trying to help you. And then it's just a mess.
Well, it's like, so let's like, let me go back for a second. Like spiritual psychosis, it gets kind of crazy in the fact to where you were talking about the dis-ease and these types of things, and you gotta like, I feel like people need to remind themselves that the dis-ease is a lack of balance. The dis-ease is a lack of healing. It's a lack of understanding oneself, what you need. It's a lack of showing space, grace, wisdom, like of yourself and your energy, of your experiences, of your traumas, of your dramas. Like it is all those things. And a lot of the times we're talking about more of the extreme cases that are, super blown out there to make it super obvious for people to see like what it can get to, right? But a lot of times what people don't realize is that it might seem ridiculous to the people who aren't in spiritual psychosis. You're like, oh my God, you think you're who? You think you're doing what? What? You're going to save the planet? What, are we Terminator? Like, and it just kind of it just kind of gets like from the outside looking in, you're like, this person's off their rocker. But then like when you think about how you got there, right? Like it's your ego in need of something. It's your ego seeking something out that is an imbalance, is not there for one reason or another. But then on top of it, it could be something super simple. Like, especially when we talk about hallucinations. I have met loads of people, either on TikTok, in person, in the spiritual community, who will openly admit that, no, they went through a spiritual psychosis moment and they had some of their most profound, what they call experiences during their psychosis moment. And they weren't in an overblown ego per se. They weren't saving the world, but they did have a ton of hallucinative type of things, either working with gods or deities or angels or energies that they still to this day cannot replicate, and two, cannot, say never happened. And that's like one of this in between. I know how many people they're like, oh, I had some of these crazy, experiences and these unbelievable things, but they get to a point where they kind of brought themselves back down to what I call earth. They grounded themselves, you know what I mean? And that changes everything.
Correct.
Whereas a lot of times when you're left unchecked is when, you kind of float off into Lord knows what. And then that's when we get like further and further away from what we're actually supposed to be, who we actually are here spirit in a vessel, right? Like, we are tied to the vessel for a reason, to learn earthly things, to do earthly things, to experience being an earthly being, or whatever you want to call it. So it's like, a lot of times I feel like, spiritual psychosis, obviously we're talking about the most extreme things to make it super obvious, but it's a lot of little things that get people there. You know what I mean?
No,
And
absolutely.
and it's like, you deal with the people who, when you're in full-blown psychosis, anything that disrupts the narrative has to go. And you will notice that people will almost egg themselves on to keep the narrative going, because it's, let's be honest, it's better than their life.
Yes.
The idea that they are achieving something, they are saving something, they are, so special that everything and anything is out to get them.
Yes.
Like, it is because their life isn't what they want it to be. It's because, that's probably, they feel that probably about the opposite about their life.
Correct.
You know what I
I was
mean?
just gonna say
That they
it's
feel like
the
nobody
opposite.
sees them, that they don't matter, that, that, and all these things. So that's their physical lack, which is translating in an energetic way. And when it was left unchecked into its own devices, it fed the part of the ego that made you feel special. So therefore, what did we do? Our brain told us, our ego told us, we wanted more of that. I want more of that thing that makes me feel good. I want more of this dopamine dump. I want more of this. I want more of this, whatever. So you almost end up fueling your own drive to stay in psychosis. And I have witnessed personally, and I know you have as well, you know, the person who will make anything fit their narrative.
Correct.
And that's why it's so important. And you hear me and Keys say it all the time. Take what resonates and leave it if it doesn't. Do not try to make it fit Cinderella, because you will notice that if you can take any message and make it fit for you, and I mean any message, regardless of what it's talking about, what it's whatever, and you twist it and contort it into the weirdest of ways and be like, that's for me. And you're looking at it and you tell somebody and they're like, I don't see how that's for you. And you lose it, because they are challenging your narrative, and it means if it doesn't fit, then your narrative falls apart. Right then and there, you got to check yourself. Right then and there, you got to check yourself. You know what I mean?
That's the thing, is people who do reads, is people who have those spaces available. I'm going to tell you right now, every message that somebody gives does not typically resonate for everybody. Because the thing is that, like you just said, you can't, well, you can, let me rephrase that. You can you can absolutely mince and chop and take pieces and parts of a message and make it apply to you, right? But when you
Yes.
are sitting there discerning a message or listening to a reader or whatever it is, on talk, on social media, on YouTube, whatever, right? It's the message is the whole. So if they're giving a collective message, right? They are feeling into a collective energy at that piece and in that moment in time. If you're shopping the message and not taking it in its entirety, then you are literally being the definition of making a shoe fit that doesn't necessarily fit. If you can't take it kind of as the whole, then it probably doesn't necessarily fit for you. And when I say that, and I'm going to use an example, and this won't always apply to everybody, but let's just say you're scrolling, right? And like whatever, just doom scrolling, right? And you happen to see, words, numbers, whatever on a screen, and it's just a number or it's just a this, and you're not taking any context, but that wasn't the sign you were looking for. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying, it matched up, it gave you a confirmation of something else. I'm just saying, like, oh my god, that was for me because this was on here, this, and you don't take the time to sit and listen to it, or you don't go in its entirety before saying, oh, well, it said justice was being served, so it's for me because this number was on there, and you have no idea the context that a reader is talking in. Because the thing is, if you're in a situation where you are seeking justice, your ego, your essence, your whatever you want to call it, is seeking some kind of outside of validation for the experience that you're going through. So again, that's part of discernment, is if you think something's for you, you need to look at it in its entirety. If it then fits in its entirety, then that might be for you. But when you just mince every little thing everybody says and you're like, oh my God, all of this is about me, that kind of borders on that unbalanced ego kind of, and again, that grandeur, that self-importance, that's every single thing somebody says is meant for me type of energy. And you kind of got to go back and be like, why am I seeking so much external validation in my life? Like you said, a lot of these things that manifest in these spaces, it's actually sad if you can sit in the seat of the observer and say, wow, this
Right.
person feels really bad about themselves. They really have been hurt in a way that they don't trust anyone around them. Or, they need people to validate and accept them because they keep people at an arm's length because they're so afraid of getting hurt that they can't maintain friendships, relationships, you know, job, and you know what I mean, like co-workers. I mean, every interpersonal relationship becomes a struggle because it's rooted in something in that unbalanced ego.
Well, like, and that's the thing, and I feel like a lot of people overlook it. You know what I mean? But spiritual psychosis is a form of mental distress.
Yes.
That is super important and something that should never be overlooked. It is a form of mental distress.
Yes.
Your body is under, and your mind is under so much pressure, stress, that it is in immense state of fight or flight, an immense state of survival, an immense state of whatever. And sometimes it's, unfortunately, nobody talks about it much, but when we ascend at a rapid rate and we don't allow for our physical body to have moments of pause, purposeful pause, to adjust, to, relax, to calm down, if we're not using good practices of spiritual hygiene while we're in an ascension phase, our body can be overloaded. And overload for the energy body, because we are not our thoughts, but our thoughts are byproducts of energy upgrades coming into contact and all these things, they can form unhealthy mental patterns, unhealthy mental processes, unhealthy mental interactions that a lot of people don't really talk about, because you're in fight or flight. You're not thinking rationally. You know what I mean? Like, you're not taking the moment to pause and slow down and to, like, let's ground, let's really just, like, take a second. People aren't taking that time. You know what I mean? They're running right through it. And I feel like a lot of times, it's easy to be like, oh my God, that person's off the rocker, and move along and, do what's necessary, of course. But, like, sometimes it's literally because you ascend so quickly when you have your awakenings, your oh my goodness, that if you don't have someone there telling you, okay, you need to pause, like, because you might not feel like you're doing a lot, but you just did a million things energetically on a different level, that your human body needs a second to, like, get back into tune. You know what I mean?
Yes. But that's the thing, like, you hit the nail on the head. You gotta practice the pause. You have to harness the pause. And there's the human aspect that, it's part of that programming, that conditioning, that we always have to be worried about what comes next. There's no rest here. It's hurry up and move on. And that's, again, that can be a big piece of things as well here. As you're awakening and you're coming to realizations in your own life. The assignment is to experience. It is that present moment. So, although it can be fun to kind of like have those pieces click together, you're given those at the precise moment for that reason. And then the excited part of you is like, oh my gosh, what comes next? Like, what's the next piece? Like, but sometimes it's to enjoy, realize, recalibrate, pause, and rest, because you've just done something energetically that, like you said, you haven't done before. And the human part of you is like, this is a sprint. Like, nope, it's a marathon. It is literally slow and steady. Although I'm serious, although the energy is not slow and steady, but it's the experience. It is the balanced ego, the soul that actually seeks the journey and not the, I want to call it the reward. You know what I'm saying? The reward is the journey. It is
Right.
the experience. It isn't like TikTok, we're running out of time because time itself is a construct. So these are all the things we're dismantling and like we said, the ego, very vital part of us. It is why we are spirit in a vessel. We fight it sometimes, even when we are in balance, because it's like, oh my God, I'm so excited. What's next? And we literally need somebody to remind us, your tribe, your people, your friends, like, get you a friend who will call you out on your shit. Because like, seriously though, like, it is so important.
Get you a buddy.
Get you a buddy. Because if you don't have a buddy, you're gonna end up in psychosis at one point or another. It get you a buddy. And that's the thing. You'll know you have a buddy when, and your buddy isn't even going to be rude about it or nothing. They're going to be like, okay, we're going to come back down here for a minute. And like, I hear you and all the things, but like, let's discern the energy, right? Like, we're going to discern it. You're going to tell me what feels like yours. You're going to tell me what doesn't feel like yours. Because again, like, you know, if there is that paranoia, there is this, you know, somebody thinks something's wrong with them. Psychosis, again, mental health issue. It is literally a cry for help. So again, you know, if you sit in a space of, and I want to say this because like, most people that are healers don't walk around saying that they're healers. Most people who know what their purpose is, they have figured out their authentic path for them. They don't go around seeking external validations, putting themselves in a box and giving themselves a label. You understand
Yep.
that like, you heal yourself, and as a result you inspire, you trigger, your energy facilitates a ping and a call to action and a call to rise in others, and you're literally embodying the change you wish to see in the world. And so you don't judge others, you help when asked for help. Or in cases like these, sometimes you can offer a kind word. You can share space for somebody. You can do so many things because you realize it's about meeting people where they are and not judging them. And that's such again, a big piece of discerning kind of who you're around, what you're around, because you do become the energy that you're around.
Well, and like just on an energy, like I feel like, you know, psychosis by itself, like let's remove the spiritual, right? Like
Yes.
psychosis by itself is everything we just talked about. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you start taking into account that we're spiritual beings, like we're soulful, we're energetic beings. If you are on this path and you're probably listening to this podcast, you believe there's something else out there and you believe that you fit but you don't quite fit, and there's something just different about you, and you just maybe go against the pattern. You may label yourself a black sheep, you may whatever, you may believe in other lifetimes, you may believe in continuation of soul, like all these types of things. Now, when we start mixing in abilities, people who have a heightened sense of something, of the six senses, right? Like, you know, clairaudience, clairvoyance, you know, whatever it is, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really matter. When you add psychosis or mental distress, fight or flight, to these types of abilities of your feelers, is what I call them, you know, when you put your energetic feelers out, the heightened adrenaline rush that happens in a fight or flight body that is never allowed to just woo-saw for even just a minute, you will be amazed at just how off the chain your abilities will get, because they are pinging off of chaos energy. They are pinging off of every little shift or transition or change within the vessel itself. With every thought that flows in, and because usually this happens with less developed beings, you know, who are truly not balanced or truly not aligned or whatever, you know what I mean, truly not healed enough in a sense of maintaining proper balance and health. throughout the spiritual, side of things. So we're only going off half-cocked at best. Like, let's be fucking honest. Like, you're only going off half-cocked because you're only learning to a certain ability. You know what I mean? You've only learned just enough not to hurt yourself or somebody, and then now all of a sudden, you know what I mean? Now all of a sudden we're in fight or flight all over again after we just spent maybe the first couple months getting out of what I would call your physical fight or flight, right? From the traumas of your either childhood, your job, your work, your relationships. You just think that you bridged out of your fight or flight, like, survival technique that brought you this far on your journey, right? And then all of a sudden, your enlightenment happens, your light body elevates to like level 12, and now all of a sudden, you're in a whole new type of fight or flight. You're in a whole new type of holy hell.
You're in hypervigilance. You have broken out of the quote unquote fight or flight, right? But now you're in hypervigilance. You're like, oh, you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. You've moved yourself out of the runner or fighter mode, right? But now you're like, that's part of your trauma. Like, it's part of healing that needs to be done. To sit in a space where you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, and you can, go in and you're not just reading the room, you're drawn to the one person in the room that's like the wild card. You have 10 people in a room and like 8 of them are happy, but you're drawn to the people who are like, hitting your energy field weird. That's because you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Those are the 2 people in the room that initiate a response in you that's like, well, I need to keep my eyes on them. I need to stand in a space where like I can see them at all times, because you're being hypervigilant. When you just read a room and read energy, it's different. When you hyperfixate because you're waiting for something bad to happen, that is a state of energetic hypervigilance. And it often comes, just like you said, after you initially spend all this time breaking out of fight or flight. Because you're in that stage where you're learning to trust your intuition, to stop discrediting yourself. But now you're on high alert.
Well, and that's the thing. And like, in spiritual psychosis is very contradictory, and it's very, what's the word? It's beautiful because certain cultures view more of a hallucinogen effect, more of a vision seer sight effect as natural, normal, or elevated. And they're not necessarily wrong. If people are having, visions, seer sight, their third eye may be opened, right? Like, and that is all natural for you, then that doesn't necessarily make it spiritual psychosis. However, when it bridges into the psychosis is when it's a dis-ease, it's damaging to you mentally, it has you back on your heels, it has you up against the ropes, you're not feeling peaceful, you're not feeling calm. It's the negative effect, right? It's like the
disconnect from reality.
Yeah, it's like the harmful side. I'm a seer. I get it. I have seer sight ability. I've seen some wild things in, my almost 30 years. You know what I mean? So it's like, I'm never saying that anybody who sees an entity or a being or an angel is, boom, psychosis. Absolutely not. No. We're talking about the type of abilities that are so heightened and they're so extra that it is harmful to you as a being to exist in this type of a state of a mental distress, because it's a state of distress. It's dis-ease. It is harmful. It's not balanced. You know what I mean? So I feel like it is really important when people start learning about psychosis, when people are talking about hallucinations, like some people who maybe not in the spiritual community will say hallucinations in general, boom, bad, not good. But people who have seer sight ability, who have, their third eye open, who have a clairvoyance to them, may be like, well, I see things, but I don't. And it's like, that's perfectly fine. If that is your normal and you function in balance, in harmony, and you are, going day to day and you're not in distress, you're not housing a bunch of dis-ease, you're not, feeling harmed, or you're not isolating, disconnected from reality, the world around you, You're not, you can look at things with an open mind, even if they challenge your beliefs. Like all of these types of things, you have rational thought that is not, not destructive to your person or your being, or, then there's a chance that you're fine. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not going to blanket statement it, because I feel like there's a lot of other factors, but like, there's a chance that you're not in full blown spiritual psychosis. You know what I mean?
Okay,
Like,
yes, and just like you said, there's a difference between abilities and the extreme.
yeah, exactly. And I think that I think we have a couple stories that we could probably share with you guys, of our experiences dealing with spiritual psychosis, either with ourselves or people we have met along our journey, that may just show you guys some variety of what spiritual psychosis can look like. So so I think we're just gonna jump right into it, and I'll let Keys kind of get into it. I'll let Keys kind of get into it just in a minute.
Now, a word from our sponsors. If you are looking for a one-stop shop for all things spiritual, check out the website www.childofbalance.com. Right now, we're running a special. Using coupon DuelingMyShadow50, it is 50% off of dual shadow work healing spaces. That's an hour and a half session, sitting down with both myself, Miss Keys, and our teams, our glorious teams, to help you work through some shadow work. And it makes it $10 cheaper than a normal one-on-one session. It's not about the money, fam. It's about the healing. It's about the help. It's about the purpose. It's about the people. It's about the community. You asked for it, and we launched it. You have had this whole month, and by the time this comes out, you will have about a week or so left to use the code DuelingMyShadow50. Good through the end of May 2024. For those of you who like the spicier side of spirituality, the crystals, the herbs, the meditative sounds, the spiritual classes, we have a handmade shop. And there is a lot on there so far, and we will be adding much more as we continue on. So if you want a one-stop shop for private spaces, spiritual guidance and assistance, mediumship, mentorship, private readings, shadow work assistance, it's all there. If you are looking for a free tree of knowledge where you can learn esoteric wisdoms, breath work, you can learn about yourself, cultures, spiritual hygiene, spiritual practices, spiritual traditions, and you can just learn about almost anything under the sun spiritual for 100% free, check out the website. And you should become a member. If you're not already a member, www.childofbalance.com. It's 100% free. It'll never cost you money. We would never charge you money. The website is about assistance and community. Take advantage of it, fam. It's a great place to go to unlock your spiritual potential. www.childofbalance.com.
So I know I think the example that I would give, in regards to, psychosis that I have seen or, experienced personally or witnessing with somebody else is, like I gave the reference earlier, being at the center of cosmic events or a concept. So like when somebody was like, I'm the leader of the 144,000, or I'm the leader of the quote unquote chosen ones. thousands. See, the problem with that is that the 144,000 is a frequency, it's not a number of people. So, like we said in the beginning, it's literally if a construct causes you to separate, divide, choose, pit people against each other, that's a big red flag. So the thing is, we all chose to be here. We chose to be here. We chose to incarnate here, whatever your belief system is. We chose to be here. So there's no one that's superior in the human world that is leading a charge that excludes such a large portion of the population here. That is literally a psychosis or a narcissistic pattern of behavior. And that is one like I have personally witnessed and seen, where it's like, you only rise because I rise first. Leader of the 144,000, bringing everybody together, me at the center. Like, those are literal things that I have experienced early on in my spiritual journey. And it's just absolutely not. Like,
And it's just like,
it leaves you scratching your head. Like, even when you're a newbie, you're like, the math ain't mathin'. Like, what is happening?
The math ain't mathing.
No, and that's why I said, like, even as a newbie, like, just getting your feet wet, you're like, I know I have a lot to learn, but like, I thought this was the opposite of the religious construct. So like, I don't think so. But again, even in my own personal experience, and I'm gonna own my shit because that's what I do.
Right.
At that point in time, did not even begin to know how to address that. It literally just hit my energetic field like, this is not what I think this journey is. And then it's almost like when you get that ping, like your energetic field is hit, that is an awareness for you, where your guides, your team, whatever you believe in, is getting your attention and saying, this doesn't feel right. You need to sit with this, pause, harness the pause, and see if this aligns with your moral compass, your beliefs, your this. Because if it doesn't, then you're continuing to sit in a space of inauthenticity because it does not resonate with the core, your soul, or the balanced state of who you are.
Well, and I think with your example too, Key, is like I think it's really important to be like, there's a difference between I'm a fractal of this essence, of this essence, of this essence, and then there's a difference, like you stated, where somebody places them as the leader of something and then goes around boasting about it in the spiritual community of, I'm this, I'm the only one, I'm the Messiah, I'm Jesus reborn, I'm, whatever, I'm the prophet, like, who's here to save the world, follow me or you're doomed. That's a whole different level, like you said, than just, I think I have ties to Anubis, or I think I have ties to this person. That's two different things. There's a healthy, I think I'm a fractal, I think I have energy, and then there's like the psychosis to where it's like my way or the highway. I'm so important that nobody else matters on the planet but me. There's like a whole different
like
level.
You said, it's understanding that we are all connected, that we are pieces and parts of a whole. Yes, we all have our own experiences, but it's to come back together. So if we're sitting in a space where somebody is like, it's this way or no way, if you don't conform and drink the Kool-Aid, you can't be here.
Drink the Kool-Aid?
That is a cult, ma'am. Like, that is a cult, ma'am. If somebody says, I do not drink this Kool-Aid, or I do not agree with this belief, if you can't have open dialogue with people because it literally offends them, their belief system, or their construct, that's not where you belong. Because this is literally a journey of bringing people together. You should be able to play devil's advocate. You should be able to bounce ideas off of people. You should have an open mind, because like, if you actually believe that we've all been lied to and everything is a lie, right? If that's like your belief system, we're all unlearning, learning new things, experiencing, and sharing that is how we in fact come together. If we're casting stones and pushing people away and saying you have to be like what I believe in, that is literally a problematic construct that hurts not only yourself, but it has the ability to ripple out in an energy of dis-ease that affects other people in this collective.
Yeah, and like bridging off of your like real world example, dude, like I had one similar that I would say was kind of this like God Savior complex as well. And me being a very, I mean, if you know me, I'm a very accepting person, right? You don't, you don't have to believe what I believe. You don't even have to, you know what I mean, agree with what I'm saying. I just enjoy the back and forth, and I enjoy people's different opinions and belief systems, and I'm super open-minded. So I know on my spiritual journey, with this specific, individual in the example, there were several, like we talked about, red flags before, where I was like, I don't agree with that, but you know what? Like, that person's existence is not my existence. It's not my reality. So therefore I don't have to adopt it. Right. But it doesn't mean I need to shun somebody. It doesn't mean I need to, hate on somebody or anything like that. So, me being younger too, to the spiritual side of things, because as much as I have had mediumship abilities, at the point where this happened, I was still new to the spirituality side of things. I was still new to the, ancient knowledge, the wisdom, the all-encompassing spiritual side, the crystals, the herbs, right? Like all of those things were still new to me. So even though, yeah, I talked to dead people, like everything else was completely brand new. So I was a newbie and, kind of got, wrapped up into craze and things right off the bat. And one of my biggest experiences that I remember when I literally wholeheartedly was like, I think I need to get off this bus, like was an experience. Yeah, when you just have that point where you're like, this is great, like I'm learning a lot of what to do, what I align with, what I don't align with. And when you just get to that point where you're like, I don't know if I'm okay with this anymore, right? Like you get to that point when you're talking with somebody, and it doesn't have to be in a spiritual context. It can be anybody, guys. Like, and it's just like, yeah, you just get that sense, like maybe this is where I get off the bus. Like, and that was one of these moments when I was talking to somebody, and this was somebody who I was working with. This was somebody, who I talk to on a daily basis. You know what I mean? At some point or another, not a crazy bunch, but 5 minutes here or there, text messages or something like that. And they looked right at me and told me that the world was ending. And I mean, looked me dead in the face on like a random evening, looked me dead in the face and told me the world was ending and that I shouldn't fear anything because this person is so elevated in the spiritual community that this person was God's favorite person, and that they were hand selected and hand chosen by God to lead the world in the new world uprising. And I just was, you talk about being caught off guard. I was just standing there thinking to myself, I'm sorry, what did you just say? And then they proceeded to explain to me the events that would follow in the next 2 months. And then proceeded to then say that a rainbow bridge didn't mean chakra systems. It meant a physical bridge, kind of like in Norse mythology, maybe, when they talk about like the bridge and, like Heimdall and like, right, like,
yeah, the Bifrost.
So, yeah, the Bifrost, thank you. So like, they were talking about this, and that the dark clouds would come, the world would be on fire, a rainbow bridge would come down from the clouds, land directly like at this person's feet, pretty much their doorstep, right, of wherever they were, because they were the ones who were supposed to walk the bridge with their wings fully with their wings fully out. And I laugh because sometimes you have to think about how you get yourself into situations, but with their wings fully extended, and they would walk up on this rainbow bridge across the veil to the new worlds. And that they would turn around.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to fix
What you guys can't see is that I can see Keith's face as I'm telling the story, because I don't know if I ever actually told this story to Keith, so she's getting to hear it the same time you are.
Nobody ever told Keys this story.
And that pretty much that if everybody, everybody who was quote unquote her, either, I don't know, what's the word, like this person's like soul fam maybe, or who was, in this person's camp or on this person's side, would get to cross the veil. And sorry, Keys, your face is killing me. And would get to cross the veil, and it was mind-boggling. But the part that really did it for me was when this person told me that when this person gets across the bridge to the other side, the quote-unquote new world, which, many big, spiritual people in the community always talk about the new world and all this stuff. So again, when we're talking about fitting into our narrative, this is how we weaponize certain spiritual things to fit our narrative. This is exactly what we talk about. You know what I mean? That because this person was chosen, and because this person was so highly loved by God or the universe, spirit, creator, whatever, that this was the sole person who was to judge humanity. And everybody who were to survive the fires, it was a lot to process. Everybody who were to survive the fires and the chaos that would come from the collapse of the old world would walk up the rainbow bridge, and this person would judge humanity as to who got to come and who didn't, because in this person's mind, they were non-biased, and they were healed, and they were in utter balance and alignment, so much so that I guess they deemed themselves with this responsibility because they felt as though the creator, God, source, spirit had given them this ability to do so. That was a lot to process, none to say the less, to have unloaded in person. Talk about controlling face. I'm not sure I did it very well, because when somebody lays that on you, as much as I have seer sight ability, as much as I do see some crazy things at times, everybody knows me. I'm very rational. I'm grounded. I can get up there in, metaphors and things like that. But once we start taking it out of metaphors and out of energy, and we start placing it in like reality, you know what I mean? But it to be so far from reality, is extremely concerning. And so I remember being utterly shocked and almost a little scared at that point, because I know they talk about people like when their life flashes before their eyes, but that happened to me. And not like my whole life, but just my spiritual journey. And I was like, what? Because this was somebody who had been a key figure in my beginning part of the spiritual journey. Like I said, I've been a medium for a while, but this is the person who was the key player in my, what I would say, awakening, because of the people that I knew them from. So like, I didn't directly get involved with this person. I knew them through very close friends and family, you know what I mean? So it was like one of those things, you trust who you're being given to by a person you trust. And then when that turns around and comes out of somebody's mouth, you're like, whoa. And that's when I really took a hard, like we always talk about, seated the observer, you know what I mean? Because that whole concept of just that simple story, and we're talking about just one moment in like a lifetime of red flags, you know what I mean? Because you're talking about God complex at the forefront, right? Savior complex, We're talking about overblown ego. You know what I mean? There are so many things, loss of rationality. Like this person was telling me at one point this person was telling me at one point in the new world, I would and this is all within the same time frame, like that we would walk outside our front doors and there would be dragons flying around, like not coinciding with what is rationally happening in the outside world. So when we're talking about a complete psychological disconnect and just how far from reality spiritual psychosis can really get, although it is kind of silly when you're not in spiritual psychosis and you don't know the people's names or places and you don't have any connect to them, like in the moment, it's quite startling. It's quite startling to hear those things out of people's mouths. You're like, what? But I know that might seem like an unbelievable story, but I can promise you it definitely did happen, and it was just as mind-boggling.
Rendered speechless very often.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have words. Find your words. But I do have words. But like what you literally just described is like a perfect example. Let's not talk about perfect examples because that should not happen to anybody. But like we've talked so much here today about, how, psychosis can be separate from, spiritual narcissism, but there is that overlap, kind of like if you think about a Venn diagram, like there is the overlapping of the two. And like what you literally just described is like, I'm sorry, it like literally marks all boxes, like all boxes are checked. Like I literally don't have words, and that does not.
Well, and we talk about this all the time, though, Keys, like, right, like that. Now, because I'm so accepting, and this is just a me thing, right? This is my humanness. Because I'm so accepting, and I'm okay that we don't have to believe the same things. I overlooked a lot of the small red flags before this moment was dropped, right? Like, because at this point, I had never had a full-blown, honest conversation with this individual about maybe what they were experiencing, or, right, like, I was only given breadcrumbs of things, right? Like you talked about being kept at an arm's length or something like that. Like, I was only given just enough, right? I was breadcrumbed along, you know what I mean? And I was never given the full story behind what this person was, seeing, prophesizing, or whatever it was, so that it's like when the moment presented itself, right, that we seemingly had gotten close enough or in a moment of close proximity to where this individual decided they wanted to share all of the plans, right, and plans that I was, I think, unaware, you know what I mean, that we were in. Like, I know I was told a couple things here and there, a couple doomsday things, and I was like, well, I don't mind having a go bag, like, whatever, like, you know what I mean, like, because I'm like, I guess all possibilities open. So, like, I already have you know what I mean, like, I already have you know what I mean, like your general, like, emergency kit or whatever, like, so I was like not really worried, but I was like, yeah, like we can go wherever, you know what I mean, if you want to go to X location, whatever, that's fine. But I had never really had an in-depth, like, one-on-one conversation that would have, like, put every single red flag right in front of me until that moment. And I was like, whoa. So, like, that's a me thing, to where it's like there was little things, like, like you say, like claiming a character, right? Like, or like, a god or a deity to be something that they are the reincarnate of, or the savior. And like, yeah, but it would like ebb and flow. So sometimes this person would talk about it, sometimes they wouldn't, sometimes they would this. So like when it's not just all day, every day, You know what I mean? Sometimes you're like, oh, okay, like maybe they think it's a fractal. Maybe they're just being like, oh, I resonate with this. My solar energy may have lived a past life at this time or what, like, right? You know what I mean? Like, but it wasn't until that moment when I was like, oh no, like, and I remember, excuse me, thinking to myself, like, oh no, like, wow, like that's a lot. And I just remember being like, okay, and just taking like that seat of the observer and being like, that's a lot to process. You know what I mean? Like, to be like, and then that's when I was like, I think I just want to see my way off this bus. And, you know, the universe did that for me when I made the decision, you know, a little bit down the road that like, this maybe isn't the way I want to go. You know what I mean? Like, just, you know, no hate, no judgment, just this, it's admit, you know what I mean?
Well, no,
I just have a different philosophy that I align with. You know what I mean?
You decide what you align with. Then the universe will remove things that do not align with where you are.
Yeah.
It's not a hateful thing. It's not a nothing. And that's the thing. You know, sometimes things just progress in a direction, like I said, where, you know, you align in a different space. That's growth. That's evolving. That's healing. And when you get to that space and you reach a frequency and alignment, there will be divine intervention. Move or be moved, shift or be shifted. And that has happened to so many of us. But, you know, I'm still just dumbfounded by that. So
yeah, and like I don't talk about it often because it's, you know, and I withhold names and things like that because I don't feel like it's pertinent.
You can share your experience without, you know what I mean? First of all, it's your story. You can tell it how you'd like to. But that's the thing. You can tell a difference between people who share pieces and parts of their journey. And I think this is a very important thing to say before I go into what is next. You can tell people who have been the recipients of abuse or narcissistic behavior or mental distress. I'm just going to call it some kind of an abuse. When you listen to them tell their experiences while still respecting confidentiality, removing names, this and that, they are literally referencing their experiences. If you want a red flag of what it looks like to be the person perpetuating that on somebody, the abuser, the narcissist, whatever label you want to give it, they will spend the time degrading, name calling, and trying to sway everybody around them about a specific person. They will like go balls to the wall is the best way I can say it. To discredit and try to sway everybody around them's opinion, even if it's people who have never met or even know the person that they're talking about, because a narcissist, an abuser, attacks the victim. A victim,
right,
or somebody who's been, I don't like to say victim because nobody's a victim here. We all become the heroes of our own story should we choose to. But when you're on the receiving end of that, you only talk about your experience. And yes, sometimes that does require, you know, you to process through who that physical person is. But you're rooted in a space of expressing an experience to work through it, not of attacking, degrading, or trying to, you know, shift people's beliefs of a said person. Which that leads me into, you know, we're going to leave you guys with some red flags, you know, as we just, you know, as we bridged over to the spiritual narcissism after that. Because
I think it's just, example. Well, because I think it's just really important because although this is, and we will have a separate one on spiritual narcissism as a whole and narcissism as a whole, like this is important because spiritual psychosis in a prolonged state, like, right, when it's more than just, you know, a month, when it's more than just maybe like a moment that you have during your spiritual awakening where everything's on level 12, and maybe it's more than just your body's, you know, readjusting to energy and your upgrade and your ascension and whatnot. You know, it's more than just that moment in time. A lot of times when it's prolonged spiritual psychosis, 9 out of 10, and it's awful to think about, but 9 out of 10 is perpetuated by people who are either narcissists or have narcissistic tendencies, which would cause an inflation of ego, an unbalanced ego that could be harmful to themselves or others. So a lot of the things that we talked about are more prolonged spiritual psychosis, to where you now have this whole narrative that you need to maintain, right? This ideology, this label, this, this character that you must be, with this story, with this outline, um, and like I was, and I know Keys said she was in the beginning, you know what I mean? Like, you're new to things, so you're trying to be accepting, you're trying to be in the seat of the student, and then there's some point when it takes a turn. But because you're new to things, a lot of times people get taken advantage of, and the people that tend to take advantage of others are the I don't like to use the word unhealed, because I feel like we never really truly fully healed, but like the but yeah, like the kind of the people who aren't okay with themselves, who have things that need to be addressed that they're avoiding, or you know what I mean, to get ahead, to whatever, the manipulators of this, to that. So I think it's really important um, to kind of talk about spiritual narcissists a little bit, just as we close out. Like he said, she's gonna give you some red flags and things to look for, so that if you're ever like, oh, how do I avoid, getting into, trouble or deal with that? I think that that's a good way
to recognize it when, Erika just said, when you are the newbie, when you're trying to discern, when you're trying to be in that student role, spiritual narcissism, as it's defined, is, a person that believes their spirituality, their wisdom, or their knowledge makes them superior to others. So, what does that look like? It can look like a lack of empathy. It can look like somebody who is seeking validation and praise from, those around them in their spiritual community. A big red flag is they refuse to take responsibility for their mistakes. So, an example, if you're prophesizing or giving doomsday scenarios, in this many weeks, in this many months, these things are going to happen, and then you're wrong. So do you take responsibility for that, or are you just going to shift and move on to the next because you can't take responsibility for something, right? One of the biggest things is to gain power and control and attention by distorting spirituality or spiritual beliefs and constructs for their own self-serving reasons.
like weaponizing.
Exactly. They exaggerate experiences, they boast outwardly about their spiritual journey. But the thing is, like you said, they know the way. And I'm putting that in air quotes. And it's like, if you refuse to follow the path, then like you're shamed. You're made to feel like something bad is going to happen to you if you don't fall in line. And that's the thing. There is that the superiority, the judging, the like, you will be cast out of this community if you don't do this. If you question me, or just whatever, if you question that person and the authority they think they hold, you are then shunned. Like, literally, like, again, that's a cult. Like, that's not community, that's a cult. So that's why I said, those are like, really paying attention to like spiritual jargon, as I want to refer to it as, where they almost try to like word salad confuse you with things, but then you don't feel safe enough or secure enough to ask for a different explanation. Because what happens if you do? You're judged, you're yelled at, you're ridiculed. And then often when this kind of like manipulation starts, you're love bombed after this starts. Like, oh, well, you were right, or you were this, or you were that. Because as more and more people start to gain an awareness, right, and they see the red flags and they leave, they've almost got to like leech on to the next energetic supply, which is within their circle of control. So you'll watch the love bombing, but you'll watch that those people that are being love bombed or put on and I call it a temporary pedestal, they have been torn down emotionally, taught to discredit their intuition, made to feel that they're the problem, used astrological and cosmic events and placements to blame on behavior. Like, it is just next level. and there's just way too much of it going on. So that's why, we just wanted to end today with giving you guys, these tangible things that you can use to discern in your own spaces as you move through your individual spiritual journey.
Right. And it's like, it could be something as simple as, come to me because I'm the only one who can heal you. Not right. Nope. Taking advantage of you right there. Come to me because I'm, the 7th star on the 3rd spot in Orion's belt. And, nope. That's a good label, but that's not going to help you, right? Like,
no. And the thing
is, what I mean?
Heal yourself. That, like, if we leave you with anything, you heal yourself. People are put in your path to help you one way or another, but nobody was given a magic wand or a special power to help you bypass the work and the healing you need to do on your individual journey to get to the point that you are okay being authentically and weirdly you.
Yep. So just be aware, and you know what I mean? This isn't out to scare anybody. This is just open and honest conversation about what a tangled web spiritual psychosis really is. You know what I mean? That if you're not allowed to challenge somebody's narrative, if you don't feel comfortable asking questions, if they have a God or Savior complex, or place themselves higher on the pedestal than anybody else around them, you know what I mean? Are disconnected from reality, are not speaking or thinking rationally, are weaponizing spiritual terms, definitions, words, labels to get themselves ahead, to make themselves more superior, or to confuse you into submission or something else that would either gain monetary funds or, something else from you that is either physical or egotistical in nature. Chances are that's not a good avenue for you to go down. Now, you got your own life. So, we always tell people to use your discernment, your energetic feelers. I tell people to put it through the bullshit detector. But don't be afraid to question anybody, and especially if they are calling themselves a spiritual teacher or something like of that nature, that would lead you to believe that you can ask questions and you can, understand things. If people aren't asking you if you understand something, but they're teaching you something, you got to really ask yourself, what do they really want? What do they really want you to pick up on, right? Like, if they can't explain it 12 different ways, and they're not concerned if you understand it or understand it. And you really have to ask yourself, you know what I mean? Like, what are you getting yourself involved in? If you have to, what do I want to say? If you have to degrade, minimize, lose yourself in any sort of way during, you know what I mean, in a negative way, then chances are you're headed down a not good avenue for spiritual growth, as far as avoiding spiritual toxicity. Maybe that's the way I want to say it.
Yes.
I think that gives everybody a pretty good idea of what, a crazy nest spiritual psychosis really is.
Alrighty. Thank you guys so much for listening in, tuning in. Thank you for joining us on the Spiritual Roundtable, where we just really get right down in it, no BS, and we just give you exactly what you need to hear. Not always what you want to hear, but definitely what you need to hear. Thank you for joining myself and Ms. Keys of Wisdoms 369 for our talk today. And we hope to see you next time when we talk about everyday abilities, so you can learn just how magical you are. And if you are not a member of the website, but you enjoy conversation like this and free knowledge and learning, We have a free tree of knowledge and you should check it out. Become a member. It's 100% free and you'll find it on www.childofbalance.com. Remember, as you go through this journey, please remember you are to feel your way through everything. Do not stop, do not make yourself smaller, and always continue to be unapologetically and authentically you, because the world needs more of that.